I'm a forecaster at the National Weather Service here in Hawaii, so you're going to hear something completely different right now. I'm going to kind of race through some of the things. Like what we do with the Weather Service is we tailor all of our forecasts to the general public, and we also do tailored forecasts for just firefighters and things like that. But this is going to be just a quick run through of everything we do, real quick. And if you have any questions, my email is right there on the screen. Don't feel bad about having to email me at some point, but know that I am a shift worker. So I'm not there Monday through Friday. I'm there all sorts of days, nights, weekends, weird hours. So way we go. So one of the best things. Oh, there's the screen. There's my email right there. You can use that anytime you want. First thing I want to show you is our website that we have. A lot of the information that we produce can be found there. From the right above that map, you'll see a whole series of options, and right there, if you mouse over any of them, it will get a drop down. So we do have a fire weather section that's specific for fire weather. You can click on that, you can go to our fire weather section. Just know one thing is that even in the western U.S., the Weather Service offices are fairly limited in the amount of fire weather specific information on there. So there's not a ton of information, but one of the places you can go is here is the routine fire weather forecast. You can just like a quick discussion about what's going on, any concerns that we have. It's a great little narrative right there. And if you scroll down, there's every portion of the island chain is subdivided, and you get specific forecasts there that's tailored for fire weather. So it's a great place to go. But I think that the only downside of this product is it's only issued once per day at about 4 or 5 in the morning. So once per day is not a good update cycle for you. So if you go back to that home page and you go to the same area, but you click on Hawaii, you can find an option here called State Forecast Discussion. And I think for the general public, this is a fantastic resource for you because this product is updated every 6 hours. So 4 times a day, you're going to get updated information. And that synopsis is really the most important part. It's going to kind of boil down and condense in about 6 to 12 lines of like what are the major factors going on for weather for the coming week. And if the emphasis is fire weather, that's what's going to be in there really. So we'll be talking about it. What follows after that could be a little bit technical, but one thing I want to point out is that we do have an optional fire weather section in that forecast discussion. That used to be optional. We would only put it in every once in a while, but now we've made an effort to put it in there. So if we deem that we're sort of in season and things could be burning, we'll put it in there and we won't take it out until we think that the risk is sort of passed. And that's probably going to be like once it goes in, it's staying in there for months. So it'll be updated every 4 hours, every 6 hours as well. So I think that's a great resource for you. Another resource you can use if you want to kind of get in the weeds a little bit is that you can click anywhere on this map that's there. So in this case, I try to find Waikoloa Village and click on that. And it'll give you a little text narrative forecast of what's going on. And you can see where I clicked is that little green square on the map. But that map is clickable and pannable, and I can kind of fine tune and click in a different place and if I didn't quite get the right place. So one of the things I want to point out is if you really want to get in the weeds and you're sort of like a weather nerd, notice in the very bottom right-hand part of that page, there's a little graph down there. If you click on it, it expands, and you can see this is 2 days of every forecast weather element we do, graphed out hour by hour. Wind, temperature, chance of precipitation, you name it, it's there. And it goes out for our entire 7-day forecast database. It just shows 2 days at a time, and you can toggle through every 2 days. So it's a really good resource if you want to take a deep dive in there. Last thing I want to do is show you about some of the web resources is go back to that fire weather section. If you notice there's a graph on the bottom there, and I'll zoom in on it for you now. This is a key component of what we call our red flag warning program. So this is a graph of the Keats-Byram Drought Index, or KBDI as we refer to it. What it is, it tries to reflect sort of the receptiveness to fire of the fuels out there. So it's sort of a proxy for what we think fuel conditions are. But it's just for one point, it's for Honolulu International Airport. And you can see the green line that runs across it, this chart goes for for 1 year. So the green line is the average day by day throughout the entire year. The blue line is the actual plot. So what it does is this KPDI ranges from 0, which is like it's rained a lot and everything's going to be green, to 800, which is it's super dry out there. So you can see how it moves through the year, and about how when you get the big drops, it responds very quickly to heavy rain events, but then it kind of slowly, as things dry out, it slowly comes back up. And you can see we've had a couple of rain events recently that's dropped it back down to right around seasonal average, maybe a little bit lower. Now, with our red flag program, there's a specific purpose, and it used to be targeted really not towards the general public, but more towards land management and firefighters. Like, that was our main mission from the Weather Service directives. And I lifted this right out of there. And it's to alert land managers and firefighters to dry fuels in critical weather conditions that could lead to widespread ignitions or control problems with existing fires, both of which could pose a threat to life and property. It was really about safety, especially firefighter safety. That was the main thrust of this whole program. But now there's an interest across the spectrum now. It has really two components. There's a watch component, which is, hey, we think there's something possible within the next 4 days. And then there's a warning component, which is, it's either happening now or it's happening within the next day or two. So those are your two options that you have. Our criteria, they're a little, out here in Hawaii, they're a little crude. We look at the Honolulu International Airport, and we look at that Keach Fire and Drought Index being at 600 or greater, which is a pretty high threshold, to be honest. And we use humidity of 45% or less and winds of 20 miles per hour. So that's indicative of pretty much a dry and windy trade wind flow day in the summer. So why do we use KVDI? Luckily, when we were tasked with doing this around 2005, 2006, University of Hawaii, this guy Klaus Dahling down at the UH Meteorology Department, which is one story below us, was coming out with a paper, and he said, hey, we found the KVDI is actually a pretty good measure of fire activity. It correlates fairly well. And that we can use the leeward stations in the driest areas. It could kind of serve as a reference as to what your fire activity is like. So we decided to go with that. So why the Honolulu International Airport? Well, I use this, I thought it would come up by now, but our RAWS network is remote automated weather stations. So there are weather instruments out in the field. If you look at this picture there, down there of the Hawaiian Islands, that was 2006 or 7 of how many weather stations there were. And if you take a close look at them, you'll see that there's really none in the fire-prone areas on Kauai. There's maybe out in Waianae Valley, there was one out there in Makua Range. There's none in most of the fire danger areas on Maui, and none up in Kohala, where there's a big fire risk. We had no data to work with. So the decision was made as to some of the stations that Dahling looked at. Only the airport could really give us real-time data that we could trust, and we could know it's going to be there, we know it's going to be maintained. That's why we went with it at that time. And it is a major weakness in the system right now as it stands that we're looking to address. So, but it is assumed that what's going on at the airport is probably a pretty good indicator of a strong trade wind flow across the entire state. And from 2007, when I did that, to 2023, you can look and see how many dots you see on that screen, and you can see that the RAWS network has really expanded during that time. But keep in mind that we need a 10-year history in order to actually incorporate the data and say, okay, we can use this for a statistical analysis that meets scientific standards. We need 10 years of data. It doesn't mean that we're not going to look at these data and use it to inform our forecast. We're using these things every day, and you'll learn about all the HECO stations that have gone up, and they are fantastic. But unfortunately, we can't incorporate that into fine-tuning our warning program just yet. But we're going to be using them, guaranteed. So I want to talk about a little bit of the forecast challenges out here in Hawaii. When you think about the red flag programs in the mainland and you think about their weathers, they go through some fairly wide swings in temperature and in humidity. This is a graph of ocean temperatures and how they change over a week. It's just sitting there. You notice we stay in the oranges and reds. That ocean serves as the sort of the modifier, like maintaining our conditions around the islands. We don't get big intrusions of warm air, we don't get big heat waves, we don't get big cold snaps, especially in the summertime during the dry season, because of that ocean. It controls everything. So because of that, it creates some challenges for us. It's really interesting, the trade wind flow with the terrain that determines all the microclimates and everything that we see out there. And you just look, a place like Hawaiʻi is 10 inches of rain, and then you go on the other side into the Kohala Mountains, and it's 140 inches of rain in 10 miles. It's an incredible change over a short distance of time. And you have to think about the forecast models that we're using, their ability to diagnose that and accurately predict what's going to happen over a 10-mile span, with that kind of difference, it's limited. The forecast models are getting really, really good, but they're not that good yet. You can see that another thing is that the treatment flow interacts. I mean, there's an idealized view of the wind coming in and hitting the mountain, but then when it hits the Big Island, it's a complex piece of topography. Now, the map I have there on the right is about 15 miles per hour if it's red. Green gets up over 20 miles per hour. So you can see how the winds kind of get forced around through the hula saddle, down, and it's really strong in the Waimea area down towards Waikoloa Village and also across portions of Volcanoes National Park. So the models do a decent job in that, but those are the areas that we really need the models to resolve, and they're getting better. The problem is that there's no one model that does really, really, really well everywhere. It might nail places in the Big Island, but struggle on Maui. So we kind of have to take a piece of different models that we know about to figure out what's going on across the whole state. And that, sorry, this projection didn't work out too well, but here's an example of the Mono Road fire in 2021. And I have it on here just to show that I put up some of the ROS networks, I put up some of the things, but the numbers there represent relative humidity. In this complex flow that we're getting, it was 43% relative humidity and 20 miles per hour in Honolulu. On the windward side of Oahu, it's more like 70% humidity. You go over to the Big Island, they have some fairly strong winds in the Waikoloa area, the humidity is down to 45%. But it's potentially raining once you get over on the other side of the Kohala Mountains. Like, this is the kind of environment that we're in all the time. So we're looking for very, very subtle differences in the trade wind flow that kind of tease out a high fire danger day versus a normal trade wind day. The incident analysis report from the Lahaina fire had two recommendations that really were specifically for the National Weather Service. And luckily one, that there's little perceptible difference between our red flag criteria and a typical summer day. We're working on that now. We're engaged with federal partners from Forest Service, and we're now part of the National Fire Danger Rating System as of September. That's starting to create indices. We have to now use that output and figure out historically with the fire activity what that means. So that's a process that's going on now. It's probably not going to be done this year. Hopefully next year. And the other thing was that we need to get out there with our partners more and really work with more briefings. We've already started to do that. When we had some instances of red flags in the late fall, we instituted a policy now where we're talking to emergency management, state and county emergency management. We're having briefings with them, and they're well aware of what's going on. That hasn't gotten down to the fire level yet, but that's a possibility. And that is all I have.
So we had a weather nerd just give a really great presentation, and it's going to be followed by an engineer talking, so hope you guys have your coffee cups filled up. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes talking about a updated wildfire safety strategy that Hawaiian Electric just completed, made public in January. It's 300 plus pages, but I'm going to try and cover it in just a few slides. I want to start off by really talking about why we're doing it and what we're trying to achieve with a utility safety strategy. For those of you who are familiar with what other utilities have done, they typically call these documents wildfire mitigation plans. For us, we really wanted to ensure that our strategy and the work that's behind it stayed focused on keeping our customers and community safe, including in its name, right? So that's why we decided to give it this very different name. But it's the same thing that you would typically see Southern California Edison or Pacific Gas and Electric file annually. We're really focused on finding a strategy that could rapidly reduce wildfire risks that originate from utility infrastructure. And to do so, we're trying to do it in a way that balances that achievement with affordability of our rates and any impacts to the reliability of the electric service that we provide. That balancing act is probably one of the hardest things to do as part of the strategy. In developing this, we really focused, or we made the strategy by focusing on identifying areas of the highest risk, because not, as we've heard already today, not every place across the state has the same level and same kinds of wildfire risk. We needed to look at the drivers of that risk, the things that may cause and increase the risk of an ignition from utility infrastructure varies from location to location. And so we want to take a look at that. And then, just like what we're doing here today, we wanted to engage with stakeholders, with our customers, and learn from them on what they're doing and what they've experienced over time to help inform our strategies. And our strategy, this is actually our third wildfire strategy. We started this back in 2019. And the idea of taking in new information, right? You heard Clay Charnett talk about this afternoon, or this morning, or this early afternoon, about how data is so important in making decisions and knowing what's going on. So as we learn, as we collect more data, as we understand better of what's causing ignitions, what's causing fires, we're using that to flow back into improving our strategy for that next go around. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, we wanted to have a strategy that wasn't just a plan that someone can say, okay, looks good, stick it on a shelf, right? These strategies we're developing are intended to be strategies that leads to the implementation of work. And we wanted to make sure that all of the mitigations that we implement are aligned with the strategy that we developed. So the strategy was involved in part because we developed the actual action plans to implement. We developed the timelines, the costs associated with each of the things that we were considering doing, and ultimately selected strategies and initiatives based upon that balance of the speed of risk reduction a strategy could provide, the cost of implementation, and then the total impact of an entire strategy to our communities. So today, you've been hearing a really good discussion from people and organizations with very, very different aspects of wildfire risk, both contributions towards reduction as well as impacts too. So this diagram tries to kind of illustrate the entire landscape of wildfire risk and all of the areas in which each of us has a responsibility to make those mitigations and reduce that risk across the board. For us at Hawaiian Electric, our efforts, the strategy that I'm going to be talking about, is primarily focused within that ignition management piece. Right? This is where our work is mostly concentrated on. But having said that, we recognize that working together with all of you here today, in the work that you do, whether you're a community organization, an emergency management agency, another infrastructure or service provider, it doesn't matter, right? We all have to work together and work together across all four of these quadrants, not just in our individual swim lanes. And that's something that we learned very early in our process of developing this strategy, and we're very committed to working with all of you on that. So ultimately, our strategy that we develop can be thought of as a strategy that's made up of four components. One, and they're shown here, we call them our four pillars. There's grid hardening and redesign of our grid. There's situational awareness, there's operational practices, and there's stakeholder and community partnerships. So I'll briefly cover each of these four items and give you some examples. So when you think about reducing the risk of ignition from electric utility infrastructure, the most obvious thing to probably think about is, well, making your grid harder, right? Making it stronger, making it more robust. And that's really what this is, right? It's hardening the grid. We have a number of things that are part of it. It includes putting in something called covered conductors. So our overhead conductors being wrapped in an insulative material that prevents it contacting the ground or with vegetation or anything really, that reduces this risk of it becoming a source of ignition. Undergrounding very key selective locations, so taking an overhead circuit and burying it underground in a duct bank. And then individual component replacements. So we have a whole bunch of devices within our grid, looking at individual pieces to say, what risk does this particular type of equipment pose, and replacing it with an equivalent functioning piece of equipment that has a lower likelihood of causing an ignition. And we have some really good examples of that at our table out there. So at the next break, not now, at our next break, go out there, talk to our guys, and they can give you some examples of what that's like. The second category is around improving our situational awareness operationally. Nathan's going to be coming up and giving you some examples of our weather stations and our video cameras that we've already deployed. We've actually deployed quite a bit in the last year, but it also includes standing up a watch office. So we, at Hawaiian Electric, on each of the 3 counties, we have a center that operates the grid 24/7. But they're focused on operating the grid, right? Keeping the lights on, operating generators, switching transmission lines. But we're standing up another office that's just focused on public safety and wildfire risk mitigation work. So it's a 24/7 operation. You're going to have meteorologists and fire scientists that are looking at, on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis, understanding what our risks are for that operational period and potentially taking actions that are needed to reduce those risks. But it also includes creating some new tools. So one of the things that we really feel is an important element to reducing risk is to have a set of tools that helps us understand that on a day-to-day basis, right, like Derek began talking about, weather changes quite rapidly. Forecasting can really help us understand what to expect and what to plan for and what to do operationally, say in the next hour, or in the next half a day, or in the next 2 days. And the tools that we're looking to develop, the information we're trying to gather as part of that will help us make better operational decisions on a day-to-day basis. One element of that situational awareness and helping us prioritize our strategy is to develop risk maps. And you heard Clay talk about risk maps earlier, but these risk maps that we develop are specific to wildfire risk associated only with ignitions that might stem from Hawaiian Electric infrastructure. So please don't confuse this with other risk maps that consider ignitions from a number of different sources. But to guide our work, we wanted to make sure we had risk maps that was focused just on the risks associated with Hawaiian Electric infrastructure. So we worked to create those maps, looked at past fire events, outage data from our infrastructure. We looked at weather conditions and where our infrastructure lies relative to communities. And with those series of historical and current data, we came up with these risk maps for each of the islands that we serve, breaking down our lands between high, medium, and low risk areas. And so we have it for each of our counties. The third strategy really revolves around improving our operational practices. So these are things like public safety power shutoffs and other things, vegetation trimming, inspections. Public safety power shutoffs is a big piece of this. I think most of you, as folks who are very well informed around wildfire safety, are quite familiar with our public safety power shutoff programs. But really think of it as our efforts to, under extreme or severe conditions in our highest risk areas, to make the hard call, to make a preemptive step, to shut off power under high-risk situations so we eliminate and avoid the risk of a line falling or tree contacting our equipment that may cause a fire. And there are a number of thresholds and conditions that we use to establish that threshold. And then last but not least, the fourth pillar is really around working with people and organizations like those of you that are here today. In developing this strategy, we've held over 100 public and community meetings to help inform our work. Many of you here in the room I recognize from our Wildfire working group meetings. I think we've held like 9, including the deep dive meetings. Really appreciate all of you participating. Your participation and the comments you provided have been very helpful in informing the strategy that we filed. So thank you very much for doing that.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Nathan Todaro. I'm an independent consultant for Hawaiʻi Electric, and I've been leading Hawaiʻi Electric situational awareness investments. Last year, Hawaiʻi Electric made 2 pretty significant investments in situational awareness technologies. The first I'm going to speak about is related to weather stations. So, as the company, committed to making plans to become ready for public safety power shutoffs last year, we realized that we needed to make incremental investments in weather stations. So that way we would have better awareness of what the real-time weather conditions are in our high and medium risk fire areas. And so last year we ended up deploying 53 weather stations across the service territory, 23 on Maui, 15 on Hawaii Island, 13 on Oahu, and 2 on Molokai. And so that was really around, ahead of hazardous fire weather conditions, making sure that we have good data to help inform our decision-making with regards to public safety power shutoffs. On the backside of that, the company also recognized that we needed to make some investments in video camera technology, so that way we could have visual situational awareness of our infrastructure during those hazardous weather conditions, but also provide first responders, fire agencies, emergency management agencies with new tools, so that way they would also have situational awareness and ultimately help accelerate fire suppression activities. And so last year we ended up deploying 44 Alert West video cameras. And so these video cameras utilize artificial intelligence technology to constantly scan the environment. And I'll talk about those a little bit more. But this year we are continuing to make investments in these situational awareness technologies. And so we have plans to deploy 46 more weather stations in 2025 before June 30th. And then we're also working on plans to implement about 85 more camera stations in 2025. All right, so just really high level about our weather stations. So here's a picture of one of our weather stations in West Oahu. And so you can see here, it has at the very bottom, working our way up, it has a enclosure box that has the battery and a data logger and some other components in it. On top of that is a solar panel. And then if you go further up the pole, you'll see a street light arm that extends out to a cross arm, and that has all of the sensors on it. And so these weather stations are recording temperature, relative humidity, wind speed, sustained and max wind gusts, as well as wind direction. And so we get this data every 10 minutes. We get a data push. And all this data is publicly available. That was one of the big things that we wanted to make sure. And so the data is available on weather data sites like Mesa West, as well as Synoptic. On the right here is just a small screenshot of one of our weather stations. It's actually the one closest to this facility. I took this a couple of days ago. And so you're able to see here over the course of that day, the wind speed and the wind gusts and the direction. And so, this is really powerful information, not only for Hawaiʻi Electric, but also our first responders. I just want to take a quick moment to recognize someone in the audience. He doesn't know I'm going to do this, but Western Weather Group is the supplier of our weather stations. And so last year, when we made the decision to invest in weather stations to help inform our PSPS decision-making, we met with a number of vendors, and one vendor really stood out, and that was Western Weather Group, and they are the official supplier of weather stations for all the California utilities as they make their PSPS decisions, but as well as many other utilities nationwide. And really, when we met with them at that time, the timelines that we had, there was no way we were going to get our weather stations in time, but Nathan, if you'll stand up, I just want to recognize you. Nathan's the CEO of Western Weather Group, and they really recognize the importance of the weather stations for the state of Hawaii. And so they put us at the front of their production line. They worked, they really made us a priority. And so without them, we wouldn't be where we are today. All right. Okay, so the AI video cameras. So like I mentioned, we deployed 44 standard camera stations. So each of these camera stations have 2 cameras on them. The cameras rotate a full 360 degrees every 2 minutes. And so what these cameras are doing is they can look, or they are able to see 10 miles on a kind of cloudy, maybe not great visibility day, up to 25 miles on a clear day. We have cameras on Hawaii Island that are able to potentially detect fires on Maui, right? And so these cameras have very long view sheds. They utilize artificial intelligence to look for smoke signals. I think the cameras and the artificial intelligence was trained on about 800,000 different smoke signals across the United States. This camera technology is also used by the California utilities. And so we essentially have almost 100% of all of our Tier 3 high fire risk areas covered with these cameras, as well as the majority of our Tier 2 medium risk areas. And so the cameras work during the day and at nighttime. So at nighttime, the cameras are able to use near infrared technology. And over a period of about 3 weeks, they kind of learn all the light signals, and they're able to detect a fire at nighttime. I know, the Hawaiian Islands aren't maybe as large as the continental United States, and so maybe the cameras, in terms of beating 911 during the day, aren't beating 911 at a higher percentage than on the continental U.S., but certainly at nighttime when people are sleeping, that's really when the cameras can shine as well. But these cameras, they provide alerts to not only Hawaiian Electric, but also our first responders, the fire agencies, emergency management. They receive a text message, an email, and it says on the right-hand side here, you can see one of those images in alerts, and it says, there's a fire at this location, here's the GPS coordinates. They're able to click on that image, and it pulls up a live stream of the fire. And so it provides our partners, the fire agencies, and being able to see that fire in real time, visually, what exactly is happening in terms of situational awareness. So I know I'm kind of out of time here. Tomorrow morning, I'm actually going to be doing a demo of the system. But in the meantime, we have these QR codes here. So you can, if you scan the QR codes, you can actually access all of these publicly available systems. But again, tomorrow I will be doing a demo of these. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got about 8 minutes left here for some questions from the audience. So just raise your hand and the microphone runners will move around. Questions? Bueller, this one.
Hi, I'm Sarah from Kula Community Watershed Alliance. Nice to officially meet you in person, Mike. My question's about the cameras. Of course, on Maui, there's been a lot of talk about them, and they're actively working in our communities. what's the connection between the cameras and, successful, timely attack or, suppression?
Yeah, I can answer to the best of my ability. I'm curious if any of the fire agency chiefs or users would like to maybe also chime in here. Some of the feedback we've really heard from the fire agencies is, they're getting these alerts and we've given them all full access. And so they get the alerts on their phone, email, and it immediately gives them, here's where the fire is located, and they're able to visually see it. And so that is tremendous value. We've heard, I know Chief Todd's here, I know he's a big proponent of the technology, so I'll be quiet and let him.
So the cameras are twofold. One is obviously an alert, and there's basically a computer AI system monitoring 24/7 at all times, and that's great. But it is a small state and small islands, and generally we're going to get the call relatively soon after a fire starts anyway. Sometimes those minutes matter, but really one of the biggest advocates, or one of the reasons I'm a big advocate for the camera systems is because it gives us situational awareness. It's a network of cameras that in our EOCs, or our emergency management, I know Talmadge is in the audience somewhere, can then train that camera on the event as it's evolving. And it allows them to have a better understanding of what's going on. And that can affect our community messaging, it can affect our evacuations. It just gives us more data to make decisions with, to see what's going on in the field, and to make good decisions for the community and for our resources in terms of where we place our resources and everything else. So one of the biggest issues for the fire department has always been that when we send all of our resources, everyone's on the end of a hose line, everyone's working, and so our ability sometimes to get good information back into civil defense or emergency management so that they can inform the public has sometimes been lacking. And so, I'm a huge advocate for any kind of a system that can allow us to just get that information automatically back into our emergency managers so they can make good decisions on where we need to go, what kind of communication needs to happen. And so that's one of the reasons I've been a huge advocate for the system, and I'm very, very grateful for HECO's kind of stepping forward and taking on that burden. I know we have a lot of other partners and communities that are also looking to expand and build on the same system so that it's not just them taking on that burden, but I think it's a great thing for the future, and I cannot endorse the work and time that they have put in to make that happen. It makes me as a fire chief very, very happy.
Anybody else have a question? There's a hand over there behind you, to your left, Nana.
Bianchi, Waikoloa Village. We have a 69,000 volt line that runs 50 feet along the edge of the developed portion of the village. And we looked at your mitigation plan that you submitted to the PUC, and it mentions undergrounding as an option, but does not identify the criteria that you intend to apply to decide which lines will be put underground. And this one, given its proximity to the village and the fact that it has 30-foot kiawe trees growing right under it, seems to be a prime candidate for that. And I want to know if you can give us more details about how you will identify the lines that will be buried and, what time horizon that would be.
Okay, so the question was around, thank you for the question, by the way. It was around the criteria, the basis of where we make decisions in our strategy of which circuits or what portions of circuits to underground. So the short answer to this is we look at the risks associated with each and every one of our 700 plus distribution circuits, as well as our transmission lines, to understand the ignition risks associated with each and the potential wildfire risks associated with each. And we look at all the different alternatives, such as keeping the equipment as is, but hardening the poles, or covering the conductors, or undergrounding as one of several options. And look at the risk reduction that that alternative provides from the level of risk that that circuit has before you take any actions. And we rank each of the options against the different alternatives. And we look at the cost benefit of each option, and our model ranks the solutions based upon its relative cost effectiveness, as well as its total risk reduction that that solution provides. And so we wanted to make that as quantitative as we could. The strategy identifies a fair amount of undergrounding when it looks at the entire system in total. For this strategy, over the first 3 years, we identified undergrounding just over 2 miles of circuits, or sections of circuits totaling 2 miles, as part of what we're going to be doing over the next 3 years. But over the longer term, because undergrounding work takes a long time, the model has identified a fair amount of potential sections of circuits to underground.
Okay, that's it for fire weather. Thank you guys so much.